What's the good word, y'all? It's your boy DKB here. We're now into day 13 of training camp. Today separated people from the pack because this was the longest day. There was an emphasis on 11 on 11 drills and ultimately a ton of work for the first and second string. Robert Saleh talked about in his press conference, they want to start ramping up the intensity, getting prepared for this team to be able to take on a full game's worth of snaps. And smart move, right? He also mentioned that this is going to continue to be a trend throughout this offseason. I would imagine we can expect this to occur again after our next preseason game against the Panthers, and of course before our Giants preseason game to end the preseason. But all in all, let's get into some of the housekeeping items because there's a ton of stuff to dive into today. Multiple people that stood out on both sides of the ball, but this ended up ultimately being a great day for the offense. A couple strong standout guys for the defense, but overall this feels like a day that the offense won. Again, keep in mind that they emphasized a lot of the 11 on 11 team period work, which has essentially been a theme, right? I've already talked about this. We've had the gotta have it drills and plenty of situational awareness football here. Part of what they mentioned for this intense practice that we utilized the entire I think he said it was 2.5 or 2 hours and 45 minutes worth of practice time that's allotted per the CBA. According to Saleh, he said, I think we scripted the equivalent of almost 3/4 of football for the first and second group. It was good because we didn't flinch, so we're in pretty good shape. So ultimately that last piece there, meaning that nobody really ended up walking away, appearing extremely gassed, looking like they weren't ready for the workload. There weren't mental issues when it comes to plays, not being able to run as many of them as we've been accustomed to. So all in all, a huge A+ for this practice by all accounts. We did miss Jeremy Ruckert, who is out on concussion, and I didn't see it. I'm not sure if Michael Carter II is officially back or not, but I didn't see anybody mentioning that he was out for this particular practice. But let's get into the on-field work because that's going to be the fun part here. Aaron Rodgers took what the defense allowed him all day in the short game, so was able to go out there and execute all of the plays to the flats, the screen game, dump offs, flicks, etc. Right? And then when the defense had to come up to try to stop some of those, he was able to go over top and make a ton of big plays, forced the defense to jump on a touchdown that he was able to dot to Garrett Wilson. He had a touchdown to Brees, who was able to beat C.J. Mosley, a perfect ball to Allen Lazard on a deep shot, who had sauce and coverage. And then he was even able to show some maneuvering out there, right? Had a scramble for a first down. There were other plays where he was able to get outside of the pocket, still make some things happen. So this by far may have been Aaron Rodgers' best practice. Multiple touchdowns, very efficient in terms of being able to move the ball, move the chains, keep the Jets offense chugging along, right? You want to talk about being able to have those 10, 12, 14 play drives where ultimately you earn yourself a touchdown, but you're also burning 6 to 8 minutes off the clock. You roll out our defense, and so it just looks like it'd be a huge formula to success if this occurs during the regular season. Tyrod Taylor was able to go out there and ball on second team as well. So I won't necessarily dive as much into him. I didn't see a ton of comments around his, but we'll highlight a lot of the players that he was working with. You take a look at our running back tandem, right? Let's kick it off with Breece Hall. He had probably the biggest play on the offensive side when it comes to just grit. Truck sticked Quincy Williams on his way to a huge play, was on the receiving end of a lot of those screen passes that Aaron Rodgers targeted for him, and ultimately walked away from today with a touchdown. You take a look at the rest of the three-horned beast here, right? Braylon Allen, Isaiah Davis, both of them, they've been showing strong downhill running ability the entire practice. We've seen it show up during the games. But one thing that popped was, again, Isaiah Davis flashing here. he was able to beat Sherwood for a big play in the receiving game. And again, if I'm the way I've seen things envision, it looks like Braylon Allen may be more so the running component to complement the running back room. Isaiah Davis may be more of the receiving component to help enhance that backfield. And then overall, they both are bringing the same style rushing, although their traits allow that and present it a little bit differently. So I'm very excited about this backfield. This is everything that we should have been seeing signs for last year, which didn't occur. But we not only have a youthful football backfield, we have one that seems like they have traits to succeed from day one in the NFL, which is rare. Garrett Wilson, G5, had himself a day. I saw tweets about him catching 6 or 7 targets, walked away with 2 touchdowns, had a huge bomb, and this was the free play with Aaron Rodgers getting he got somebody to jump on defense. It doesn't look like I caught who it was, but nonetheless, on the free play, got a 50-yard touchdown to Garrett Wilson. He had Brandon Echols in coverage, and then he had a bullet over the middle of the field or as part of an 80-yard drive to help cap things off. I mean, at this point, Garrett Wilson's just going to be on a tear for the remainder of the offseason, right? It doesn't look like there's anything in front of him that's going to keep him from being able to go out here and reset the record books for the New York Jets. So you have to absolutely be pumped to see him week 1 against the 49ers, elite defense, and watch him go out there and put on a spectacular show, right? Then you have Allen Lazard. As mentioned, he had himself a deep play versus Sauce. This is maybe the 3rd or 4th ball with Sauce Gardner in coverage that Lazard has been able to catch courtesy of Rodgers. And every single time it has been that Rodgers has provided a ball that only Allen Lazard would be capable of making a play on. So just goes to show you the dynamic ability that Aaron Rodgers is bringing, to where you can consistently have your wide receiver 4 or 5, whatever you want to look at him as, be able to beat your top cornerback just because of the precision that he's placing on this ball to his targets. Irv Charles is the other standout for offense. Undrafted free agent going into his 2nd year. Actually, I believe this is his 3rd year, right? Because he wasn't part of Jason Brownlee and Xavier Gibson. So going on to his 3rd year, by far his best camp of the entire offseason, and definitely probably the 2nd best player on offense today, not named Garrett Wilson, and I'm not including Rodgers, obviously. But beat Stiggers for a touchdown courtesy of Tyrod, had himself a huge play over the middle, and then probably his biggest play of his day was the touchdown he got in double coverage. Stiggers, and I want to say Chuck Clark may have been the other name off the top of my head. My memory bank is telling me that the jersey number I saw was 39, but nonetheless, he walked away with a 2 or 3 touchdown outing day, and you have to be excited to see him break out in this way, even though it's a practice. It's one of the longer ones. You haven't really heard a ton of noise around Irvin Charles outside of his special teams ability, and with the change in rules, you don't know if he's going to have the same if the strength of him being a special teams player is going to show up to the magnitude it did prior to these new kickoff rules. So very excited to see that from him. Xavier Valladay, the other running back in the room, he had 2 big plays today. He had himself a catch down the seam, made a big play in the run game, breaking off a 20, 30-ish yard play from my understanding. Corley got in on the fun, had himself a 2-point conversion where he was wide open. Conklin was on the receiving end of a lot of those balls to the flats from Rodgers. And then defensively, those guys aren't one to just be soundly destroyed, right? You take a look at that Cowboys game from last week as one of the standout things that I'm sure is flashing in a lot of their minds pretty consistently. They never want to have that again, and they're not letting up when it comes to Aaron Rodgers. And even when he's having his best day, still making it ridiculously difficult, right? The execution level has to be at the highest, especially considering the coverage that we allow and the pressure that the defensive line is going to go out there and display. Jermaine Johnson led the way today, right? He had beat one of his blockers to get to Xavier Gipson in the backfield, racked himself up a tackle for loss, beat Mitchell pretty soundly for a sack of Rodgers, and the rest of the day was just him pretty much being in and around the tackles, around the play, forcing some kind of disruption, right? And this is exactly what you want to continue to see. And it does speak a little bit higher of a volume to me because we know Aaron Rodgers doesn't like to take sacks. He's not putting the ball in harm's way. He's generally going to get it out there pretty quick. So to still hear these kind of things is huge for us. And he might have to step it up, right? We don't know how this Reddick situation will play out. Kinlaw was known to be very disruptive all day today as well. Takk had himself Takarist Mckinley. Takk had himself another day. Been a few, maybe a week or so since he's really stood out. Had himself a sack of Rodgers, sack of Martinez, multiple pressures throughout the day, and I heard he was a strong run presence as well. So again, part of what you want to see as the defensive line rotation, us attacking guys in waves. You want each one to at least maybe have a go-to player and then pieces around them that could complement, right? So first string is just an embarrassment of riches. You have JJ, you have Quinnen Williams up front with Kinlaw, who could have himself an easily career best year, considering he'll be healthy, ideally, knock on wood, and the traits that he brings and what he did to really I want to say enhance himself, which is true, but to make himself the best version of himself for this year. Then second string, you're probably looking at Will McDonald. And then you're probably looking at Takaris here. And then third string, maybe a combination of guys like McGregor and Watts if they make it. Quantez Stiggers, he's still been continuing to make things happen on a daily basis. Had himself multiple pass breakups on the day, even though he was on the receiving end of one or two of those touchdowns to Irv Charles. Jalen Key, Mr. Irrelevant, had himself a pass breakup versus Corley. He is a guy that when you combine what he did with the Commanders, when you combine not necessarily that he's had standout days, but that he hasn't been lost. He hasn't looked like he's not NFL ready. And you start to understand how he went into an Alabama defense and earned himself a starting spot after being a graduate transfer there. Mentally smart, physically imposing, and even if he can't make the impact plays in terms of turnovers, he's making the big hits. He's having sound coverage. So this is a guy that you can probably mold up and turn into a pretty significant player a couple years here down the line. Chaz Surratt got himself a pass breakup. Leonard Taylor, he's continuing to ball out and really come on strong, as we heard Salah highlight as well the last 2 weeks. Had himself a tackle for loss today. So overall, I'm going to leave it at that, guys. We had ourselves an A-plus practice. This is about as clean of a practice you can have with having multiple standout guys on each side of the ball without it being a day that leans heavily in favor of one side or the other. Again, offense won in my opinion and by all accounts that I've seen, but the defense did enough to where you can say you could walk away proud, right? And at this point, I'm really excited. If Aaron Rodgers is the guy that I think he is this year, I'm very excited with how our defense has responded to having to play and go against him in coverage pretty consistently throughout this offseason camp, right? So let me know what you guys think. As always, I know you guys are top-notch researchers as well. You guys tend to drop a lot of nuggets off for me. If I, miss anything, I tend to do a fair amount of research for all this stuff myself. But let me know. Appreciate you guys watching and supporting as always, and I'll catch you again. Peace.